All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. And why don't we begin with the first lesson? Now we've kind of gone over HTML already. You've learned the basics of HTML. You know how to add tags, remove tags. You know how to open and close paragraphs, headings, span, and all that good stuff. So why don't we get to Cascading Style Sheets? And when we talk about CSS, we're going to talk about styling. It's kind of like a lengthy process, but once you understand CSS, you can do a lot of cool things with it. You can do transparency, you can do animation, you can do all kinds of like layout stuff that really makes your web page look good, and then you can convert this web page into like a hybrid mobile app if you wanted to. But yeah, so why don't we begin with what is CSS? And as I said earlier, all CSS is a cascading style sheet. It's basically rules that we're going to apply, and we're going to specify how things are supposed to look in the browser. Whenever you build a website, we want to apply a style to it, right? You can't just have regular plain old text. That's super boring. So you want to apply styling. And if you want to think of CSS in an analogous term, then HTML would be like your skeleton, and in CSS is the rules of how you look, right? All the stuff that goes on top of it. That's what CSS is, and that's how it applies to your website. And all we're going to do is just kind of learn how the rules work. You need to learn different rules, and there's a lot of rules. To be honest, like so many rules. There's books on CSS rules, and I'm just going to give you the basics, and there's a whole lot more. So when you understand this, you need to think about your HTML elements. And you understand that every single element is sitting inside its own little invisible container, okay? And these little invisible containers is what you're going to style. You're not going to make it invisible anymore. You're going to apply rules to it. You're going to tell it where to sit on the page. You're going to tell it what size it is. And if you think about this invisible box around the text that you're looking at on the screen now, CSS allows you to create the rules that control the way each individual box and the contents is presented. So just looking at your screen now, you see like this green, grass and pond background. And then on top of that, you have this opaque layer of white. And then you have a font style choice for the header. You have these bullet points. And then you have the different font sizes for the point itself. That's kind of like what CSS would do in your regular page. So the CSS code is written and coded into the head portion of the HTML document. And if you're going to build more than one page, then you actually want to create a separate CSS tag. So what you're basically going to say is, look, I'm going to link to an external style sheet. And there's the code on the screen now, like how we link to an external style sheet. And this is important because let's say you have a website that is 100 pages, right? Instead of just editing one page, editing one page at a time, you can just change one rule in CSS and it will affect all the other pages. So think about this. Let's pretend you had your entire home, and you said, I want every single room in the house to have like a blue background or a blue wall. So all you would do is just change one rule in your blueprint and every single wall would be blue. That's kind of what CSS does as an external style sheet, is saying that, look, I want to manipulate and change every single thing on this website that relies on the same CSS sheet. Just think of it like as a master blueprint of how the page is going to look, how everything's going to be laid out. That's the easiest way to think about it. So when we think about CSS, we have these associative rules, and we associate the rules with the element. And so CSS works by associating rules with HTML elements, and there's two main parts that you have to understand. There's a selector and a declaration. Now, I want you to remember this. There's a selector and a declaration. So take a look at this picture example. We have a selector. We're selecting all the paragraph tags in the HTML document, and we're going to make a declaration. And in the declaration, we're saying we're going to make the font family Arial. That is to say that every single paragraph tag, every single P tag on there will have this font family Arial. I want you to look at the style choice too. Look at those white curly mustache braces. I call them mustache braces. They've been called curly brackets, but call them what you want. So on those two braces, that's where the rule sits inside of. okay? All the rules sit inside of those curly braces. And you can apply more than one rule or more than one declaration for any selector. So for example, we could have maybe 10 different declarations for one selector. We could declare the font family, the size, the color, everything for the single selector. All right? So just to clarify, you can have multiple declarations for a single selector. So what are selectors? All we're saying is that selectors indicate which element the rule applies to, and then the same rule can apply to more than one element if we separate the element names with commas. So let's kind of think about what I just said. You can say, if you want to apply the same rule to a paragraph and an H1 tag, you would say P, comma, H1. But these are declarations, and declarations indicate how the elements referred to in the selector should be styled. And we split the declaration now into two parts, all right? So we talked about a selector and we talked about a declaration. The declaration has two parts. We have a property and a value, and they're separated by a colon. Now you might have seen that in the last slide. So let's go back to that last slide really quick. See the font family and Arial. So one is the property and one's the value. Font family is the property, Arial is the value. So CSS properties affect how elements are displayed. And I talked about this. They sit inside those curly brackets. And again, each is made up of two parts, a property and a value separated by a colon. And we can specify several properties in one declaration, each separated by a semicolon. Now, we can separate H1, H2, and H3, those heading sizes, and the properties in pink and the values in yellow. So we have two declarations, and every declaration has a property and a value. All right? So this particular CSS rule has two declarations, font family and color. Those are two declarations. But in those declarations, you have property and value. So properties and values, properties indicate the aspect of the element you want to change, like color and font and all that other good stuff. And the values specify the settings. So if we want to choose a different, specify a different color property, then the value of the color you want the text to, in these elements to be, you could change that too. So that was part one, and it's pretty easy to understand, right? I mean, selector, declarations, properties, values. You're just applying styles to HTML. That's all you're doing. That's all you're really doing. So when you go over part two and all the other parts, it's going to get a little more complicated as we go on. So make sure you take notes. You know what? It's not going to be that complicated. If you pay attention and you know what you're doing, then you'll be fine. You'll be fine. All right. I'll see you later. Bye.